Alrighty, we're live here. It is another Pittsburgh Hockey Now live chat. I am Dan Kingerski. Do me a favor at any point, if the sound starts cutting, I've made significant changes. There's still one thing I have yet to change. So if the sound pops for you, if it goes up and then way down and stays down, let me know immediately. I'll just unplug the entire system and we'll talk straight to the laptop. So that's how we'll roll today. Because, well, I did buy a whole new board setup, but the first one that arrived I didn't like, send it back. A new one is on the way. So we'll see if we can get by today. Listen, I changed everything, including where to plug it in. I changed wall outlets just in case that was one of the issues. What we'll talk about today, Sidney Crosby, all but signed. I know it didn't read that way. I know a lot of readers were like, wait a second, Dan, he didn't say he was all but signed. He said he's only pretty optimistic. I'm still a little worried. The reality is, if you listen to it, we only had the audio because it was kind of in a room out in Vegas for some of the NHL.com guys, some of the national guys who got to ask some questions. And if you listen to it, it was entirely dismissive of any sort of trouble. He doesn't know what day it will be signed. In fact, it really could be today. It could be tomorrow before the team leaves for the Prospects Challenge in Buffalo. It could be when Kyle Dubas gets back from Buffalo. But it certainly seemed quite imminent. So now that the Crosby situation is essentially done, and given his words about where the team is headed, I think we can begin to plug all of that into what comes next, both in terms of the players' expectations and their efforts and what Kyle Dubas will do concurrently. I finally figured out how to insert photos and stuff and overlay. However, let me adjust the screen. However, you have to save them as PDFs and as PowerPoint slides. I just didn't have the time today to monkey with that, so we'll still share the screen to break up my face being on here. So we'll talk about Crosby. We'll talk about some young players who still could be on the NHL trading block. I think that's what Dubas is probably looking for. You're not going to see him acquire a 34-year-old again. You're going to see him acquire a 24-year-old, if at all possible. And, of course, your questions, your comments. Let me quickly share this to everybody now that, in fact, we are live, which still craziness here. Let's see here. Bear with me 2 seconds. In fact, you can start firing questions away at me here as I jump into our own studio so I can put this on Twitter to let everyone know that I did show up, believe it or not. All right, You think it would do this automatically, don't you? It would just share it right out to Twitter. But no one, the software doesn't know how to hook up yet. And share. There we go. Okay, so I think I just wrote this on Pittsburgh Hockey Now all of an hour ago. And that is, Crosby is not coming into the season to rebuild. That's the interesting part about this, because he immediately deflected the question, if or when, your team is struggling to win, make the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera, are you concerned about your desire to win versus Kyle, essentially rebuilding? It weren't the exact words, but I'm paraphrasing all there. And he went immediately to the last two seasons and just missing the playoffs. That's where the players' minds are, and that's where Sidney Crosby is. Let me jump back here, and I can even share screen with you. There we go. Penguins fork in the road. The players and Dubas difference. That's going to be kind of a little side drama playing out this year. And that's the same thing that Dubas said at the draft, don't forget. He's not looking at it from a day-to-day operation anymore. He's now looking at it as a year-to-year operation, years stacking on top of years to get to becoming a Stanley Cup contender again. Now, by direct inference, his own words, again, indirectly indicated that he knows the Penguins are not Stanley Cup contenders. That is an interesting turn because everyone has always talked about, even the last 5 years, cup contenders, even as we all kind of knew, like, listen, they're going to make the playoffs, but, well, now even the playoffs are not a guarantee. In fact, they're not favored to make the playoffs. So Dubas conceded that the players and the coaches are going to want one thing. They're going to try to win every game. They're going to go full speed to winning and making the playoffs. And he is going to go full speed in trying to acquire talent for the future, be it draft picks and young players. So you're going to have this dichotomy. At what point does Dubas, in fact, have to make a decision on the season? I think we've briefly talked about this before, but I think maybe now is the right time to really get into it. And oh, by the way, like and subscribe for me. That way you'll get notified of these live chats, and I get paid. What happens if the Penguins are better than most people expect in the first half of the season? It happens. Philadelphia, case in point last season. What happens then? Let's say they get into January. You're going to have that big 3-week break. Oh, that's going to just kill Pittsburgh hockey now, by the way. You're going to have that 3-week break for the Four Nations face-off. And I think a lot of the GMs are going to be very busy around that time. So let's say the Penguins are in third place by, 4 points. Let's just say their playoff outlook is rosy. That, they're going to make the playoffs, or at least it looks like it in January. What does Dubas do? The point I made in the article there that I just showed you, the fork in the road, take the Philadelphia Flyers last season. They were in third place. Their playoff outlook was rosy, but GM, and I still call him Danny Briere, but I guess he goes by Daniel now that he's the boss. GM Daniel Briere said it doesn't matter. Our goal is to build a contender. We can't get caught up in trying to make the playoffs one season, which, Dubas said he had no desire. It would hold no allure to him if the Penguins squeak into the playoffs by a point or two. He wants to build a contender. So we get to January. Marcus Pettersson, let's say he's not signed yet. Then what happens? Does Dubas emulate what the Flyers did last year when they traded Sean Walker to the Colorado Avalanche for a first-round pick and Ryan Johansson? It seemed like that move sort of discombobulated the Flyers. Although they were a very young, inexperienced team, you saw what the Jake Gensel trade last year did to the Penguins for a solid week. Do you trade Marcus Pettersson, building for the future, when your team needs him now? Would you trade Rickard Rakell? Would you trade, go down the list? I still wonder if Erik Karlsson, what the deal is going to be with him. And I probably should get into typing that rather than speaking about it. But here is a guy who came to Pittsburgh to win a Stanley Cup, to be a contender. If If he's not going to make the playoffs, is he going to just, kind of have his agent give Kyle a call and say, hey, maybe we should look at some teams that can win a Stanley Cup? That's the push-pull, right? 2 years ago. Even 1 year ago, this wasn't the conversation. It was about the Penguins getting to that next level to win the Stanley Cup in the immediate. Now we're talking about it 3 and 5 years down the line. And that opens up this whole greater conversation. So let me get to some of the comments here. No one's yelling at me about the sound yet. Do me a favor. If the sound pops and starts doing that thing where it modulates and goes down a little bit lower, let me know. Seems to happen around the 20-minute mark. I wonder if things are overheating or if my laptop goes crazy. But just let me know if it happens. All right, so we're going to start here at the top. Austin, even if Jari and Nedeljkovic have good seasons, if Blomqvist, Murashov are NHL ready a year from now, I would imagine Jari and or Nedeljkovic are traded to clear space. That would be interesting if both are ready. That might be a first, to have two hot-shot goalie prospects mature at the same time and be pushing for the NHL net. I suppose it happened 5-6 years, about five years ago. All time runs together for me. When Vitek Vanacek in the Capitals organization kind of matured a little faster. And who the other guy is now with the Maple Leafs. Forgive me, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Oh, darn it. That's going to drive me nuts. What is his name? I'm actually going to look it up real quick because he's not on the roster anymore at the Maple Leafs. Come on, help me out here. They put him through waivers last year. And anyway, they were both a couple of young 20-somethings who came up at the same time, and the Capitals didn't know what to do, so they kind of rotated and then traded one, and then realized they should have traded both. I digress. Don't forget, Austin, it takes two to tango. So even if the Penguins wanted to trade a goalie or both goalies, there would, in fact, have to be a market for them. I'm not sure right now that there is a market for Jari with 4 years, at a 5.375 cap hit. I'm not saying Jari is not a good goalie. I think we've tried to hold the line on reality versus emotion on that one. But I also know a lot of teams aren't lining up to take that gamble with 4 more years on the contract. Jari's going to have to play well in the first 4 or 5 months of the season. He's just going to have to kind of show that swoon last year was an aberration, or at least if a team acquires him, that it's a chance these late season troubles have been an aberration or that he can overcome them. If he plays, if he goes back to .919 save percentage through December, and just to follow your hypothetical, if Blomqvist or Murashov or both were pushing for the net, I think there would be a market for Jari. I think there's always going to be a soft market for Nedeljkovic. He's a $2.5 million backup, which kind of puts him, he's not a cheap backup any longer. Last season, at 1.5, he would have been a cheap backup. And I'm still a little bit surprised they didn't trade him then, quite frankly. Jay Gensel, why wouldn't you trade Nedeljkovic? They held on, and I suppose there wasn't much of a market for him last season until he showed what he could do in the final 15 games of the season. Even if his numbers weren't great, the eye test and the on-ice reports of what he brought to the team were definitely, they would make a GM interested. Not the stat sheet, but the eyes for sure. BJ, what up, Dan? Looking forward to actual hockey soon? Yes, I am. All right, Negative Pressure Productions. I saw a site that has projected lines with Raquel, Crosby, and Rust. Hey, I suppose at this point we're all guessing a little bit. I don't agree with that. I don't think you'll see that. I don't see any reason whatsoever to tinker with that second line, which would be Bunting, Malkin, and Raquel. I think Raquel brings the slick skill, playmaking. I think Malkin is a good pivot on that line because he can score goals, he can make the plays, and Bunting can go get the puck and get to the net. I think that's a wonderful trio that the Penguins found last season. If there was a difference, I don't know the exact numbers, but the Penguins' goals per game in the final 15 shot way up. And that would coincide with the Bunting acquisition and getting just a little bit more comfortable. So, no, I still think it's all highly likely, let's say that, highly likely that O'Connor, Crosby, and Rust is your top line. Maybe in short order, McGroarty asserts himself where he can play on that line. Heck, I don't know, maybe Anthony Beauvillier just seizes the day. Carpe diem. By the way, carpe diem for you Zoomers means seize the day. It's kind of like YOLO, but with education. We're good. Okay. Let's see here. Let's see. What's it say? It also had McGroarty with Malkin and Bunting. I don't know who did that, but I don't see any of it. If Josh Yohe did it, I would put some. I'd have a beer and we'd discuss it. If one of those nickel and dime blog wannabe sites did it, I probably would say just next time, don't stop the thumbs. Let's see. Gary says the Penguins didn't get anyone that should make a difference this offseason. Dubas is a cheap Maple Leafs has-been. Why did we get him? Gary, I wonder where you stand on this. All right, Dan, genuine question from BJ here. I want to take a trip to Pittsburgh and catch a couple of games this season. Recommendations, local spots I can't miss. Boy, that's a little bit of a longer answer, and I will tell you straight up, the food scene in Pittsburgh in the last 5 years ago was the chef restaurants, the small chef restaurants, which dominated the let's call it 2005 to 2015. The great spots, chef, Spoon and Spork even. There was a place that's now the deli in Squirrel Hill that was a Peruvian infusion little place. I took the friends there for a dinner party one night, and we cleaned the place out. I think we had there were 10 of us, and we probably went through 10 bottles of wine because the food was so good. The chef just came out and said, okay, what else do you guys want? It was just us in there at some point, and he was just making us stuff. And my friends still talk about how great it was. And there was all these little great restaurants, and the New York Times was writing about us. They're all gone. Even those little places on in Highland Park, that the street there in Highland Park, they're all kind of gone as well. I would tell you go to the Cultural District. Emporio, the meatball joint, is still a standard favorite. There's a place next door, Bourbon and Bridges, if you want some bourbon. Just, check out those little places. There is a place, Con Alma. I actually haven't eaten there, but it's a jazz club just across the Clemente Bridge, Con Alma. And it is just the coolest place to go hang out. Maybe dress a little, add a little soir de vivre to the outfit that night when you go there. Don't sit there in sweatpants. But they get some amazing jazz musicians in there. The cocktail is great. Otherwise, there's plenty of bar options. There's tons of bar options in Pittsburgh everywhere. Okay, but I'll cut it short there. So many of the places I loved are gone, and it kind of breaks my heart. JR says Pettersson is gone by the trade deadline no matter what. There's something to be said, JR, that I think you might be right. Just like the Flyers traded Sean Walker. If Dubas can pull off a return like the Flyers got, a number 1 pick in Ryan Johansson, which actually turns out even better for the Flyers since Johansson found an injury after he was traded. That's going to be a little bit of a messy hearing when they finally get to it. Or if maybe they've had the hearing in private and a decision is going to be rendered. I'm not sure the exact status of the situation. But if the Flyers can get that number 1 pick and get that contract off their books, Nashville was eating half of the $8 million deal they gave him. But, whoo, boy, that'll help the Flyers. If Dubas can get that late number 1 pick, or even just, 20s plus number 1 pick, I certainly think that he would jump at that. Oh, nitrate. Dubas has been fairly good for the Penguins since he got here. That must be a response to our buddy Gary. Let's get to Nitrate's question. Pettersson is gone by the deadline if they aren't competing. If they are in the race, firmly, he will remain on the roster. That goes back to Dubas's choice, right? That's kind of what the whole fork in the road article was about. And I'll show it to you again. I should probably post the link. That's what the whole article is about, is what happens if. And there are 2 forks to the Penguins' road. If they're good, what does Dubas do? If they're really bad, how deep does Dubas cut? And what I mean by how deep is, let's say, they cross that Thanksgiving threshold and they get to early January and they're 6 back. Dubas has every right to wave the white flag and say, yep, didn't work last year. It's not working this year. How deep does he go? Bear in mind, and I don't think people realize this. Brian Rust's no movement clause ends, or, no longer in effect next summer, July 1st. So beginning July 1st of 2025, he has no protection any longer. So he would be very susceptible to Dubas kind of saying, hey, do you want to pick where you go now, or do you want to pick where you go in July? Because I have some offers for you. You can go to XYZ. I still think, he would be a great leader and scorer for an inexperienced playoff team. Not quite Gary Roberts level, but he would bring that intensity and leadership to a locker room. Perhaps Ottawa is in it. Ullmark is on his head, and Ottawa is in the playoff spot, or Detroit is, or heck, even Buffalo, and they need some of that Brian Rust, whatever it be. That would be a question. If the Penguins are out of it, how deep would he go? Would there be a market for Rickard Rakell, who is going to have 3 years left after this year? And you'd have to assume all these guys on 1-year deals, Lars Eller and Anthony Beauvillier and Matt Grzelcyk, they would be prime trade fodder as well. But who do you replace them with as well? That you can't trade everybody, so somebody would have to stay behind to turn off the lights. Okay, go back to 09 trade. Who do you have as your opening night roster? Forward lines. Oh, that's a long question. Come on, man. No, I think I've written about this. It's been a few weeks. O'Connor, Crosby, Rust, top line. Bunting, Malkin, Raquel, second line. Third line, I still lean towards, because he was a July 1st signing, I lean towards Anthony Beauvillier getting a shot on the third line. I think Kevin Hayes will be your third line center, and probably Rutger McGroarty. Now that they could flip McGroarty and put him on the left wing, Hayes in the middle, and put Beauvillier on the right wing. And then the fourth line, you're going to be talking, it'd be hard to pass this fourth line up. Lizotte, Eller, and Achari. Everybody else, sorry about your luck. Do they keep Vasily Ponomarev as the 13th forward and flop him in for Beauvillier? I will tell you this about the NHL trade chatter that you're not hearing. See, public trade rumors focus on names like Nick Robertson. The industry trade rumors, the stuff that we're hearing, and it's not printable because it's more idle chatter than it is, hey, they're talking to this team. But the idle chatter on the inside is that you could see more trades and more waiver wire movement in October than you've ever seen. Take it for what you will. The Penguins would certainly have to put a handful of guys through waivers. Sam Poulin, we've talked about that enough times. I feel bad talking about that because Poulin has overcome so much. I don't want to kind of talk bad or talk badly about the player. The reality is, unfortunately, that he's probably 15th, 16th, even 17th on the depth chart. And yeah, so you will see some waiver claims, maybe some trades. I like Lars Eller a great deal, and I'm surprised that a young team, a Detroit, an Ottawa, a Buffalo, again, even L.A. No, L.A. is not that young, but I suppose I'm looking at teams that need some leadership who are on that playoff bubble. Eller's your guy. Oh, that's right. Sergei Samsonov. That was the other Capitals goalie. Thank you, Brendan. He responded 16 minutes ago. I'm just seeing it now. Sorry, y'all. Oh, Vegas snapped him up. I should know that. Okay, let me scroll through the questions here. Speaking of Eller, Stephen Wagner, do I think Eller would be a good, steady veteran center for McGroarty the way Trottier was for the rookie Jaromir Jagr? Oh, I don't think Kevin Hayes would be an unsteady guy. I actually think there's some congruity with McGroarty and Kevin Hayes because neither of them are blazingly fast skaters, but they're sort of playmaking guys. But McGroarty will shoot the puck. So if you put McGroarty with Hayes, he might get a few more snaps. But also because Hayes, in fact, said he wants to be a lot more. He wants to shoot a lot more this coming season. McGroarty could be setting him up, and they can let Beauvillier use his speed and go get the puck for those two. But yeah, sure, Eller would be just fine. I don't think Eller is a great playmaker. Quite in the. Let me retract that word. Great. I don't think Eller is quite a playmaker as Hayes is. Eller is more of an all-around workhorse, third line, fourth line center sort of guy. He'll score 15, 16 goals, get 30 points, but he's not a guy you want to rely on for offense. Hayes does have that potential if he can get his game, going. Also, side note, obviously, I think we are all heartbroken with the Goudreau service. couple days ago, and Meredith Gaudreau's messages to her words to Kevin Hayes and Sean Monahan were just they were heartbreaking, and it our heart goes to Kevin Hayes for everything he's been through and what he's going through now. That was a bad beat for sure. Universe is just a cruel place sometimes. Dave, what's your expectations for lines 3 and 4? I guess we've been through that. Gary says, Yager needs to be the general manager. Bring back Yager. That would be interesting. Okay, we're going to go to Austin. Do you see anyone on the current roster or a prospect that could potentially score 30-plus goals now or one day? Let's see what McGroarty's got. If there's anybody who could do it, it would be Rutger McGroarty. Certainly Tristan Braz isn't going to be that guy. I don't think Tanner Howe is going to be that guy in the NHL. Of course, I don't know that people thought Brad Marchand was going to be a 35-goal scorer. So you're kind of looking at McGroarty, to a much lesser extent, Tanner Howe. I know those of you who know the prospects are dying for me to say Ville Koivunen because he absolutely torched Finland last year. But I'm going to tell you, until I see more from that player, until I see a better game from that player, I'm not going to put him in that category. I had serious reservations after watching him play the first couple of games with Wilkes-Barre against Lehigh Valley in the playoffs. If they had been his first 2 games in North America, I would have written them off and said, chuck them. But he had played 12 games prior in the Carolina system. So he already had some expectation to 12 games is nothing to sneeze at. So that's the thing. I was, I knocked significant points off for Ville Koivunen. Otherwise, no, the Penguins don't have that prospect yet. Somebody can always surprise you, of course. All right, let's see here. Rich. Seems to me the fork choice could be based on progression of younger guys in the lineup. Actually, quite the opposite, Rich. The fork in the road will depend on the older guys in the lineup. There aren't going to be many young guys in this lineup unless they clear some space for them. Vasily Ponomarev isn't going to be there unless they clear some space or unless he comes to camp just like a ball of fire and knocks out Beauvillier and a Blake Lizotte or a Nola Chari, which probably isn't going to happen. Those guys they might not be great NHL players, but they're competent NHL players to a certain degree. And Ponomarev is not going to be, a top 6 guy who comes in and flexes to knock one of those guys out. So it really is going to depend on how the established veteran core performs in the first several months of the season. It's going to be, can Crosby continue the torrid pace he was on last year? Can Evgeny Malkin continue the pace he was on in the final couple of months? Can Ricard Raquel stay at career north without a 22-game swoon that he had last season? Can Brian Rust stay healthy and contribute to the team as he does when he is healthy? He's always a sort of a 25, 30-goal pace sort of player, but he has to be healthy. And can he do that? Can the defense? Can Matt Grzelcyk balance out Chris Letang or Erik Karlsson if Ryan Graves doesn't have that bounce back? See, we talk about question marks. There are far more question marks on the defensive side, but in terms of younger players, I don't see Valtteri Puustinen in the lineup. That's the guy I was trying to think of a minute ago, too. I think Poulin and Puustinen are not going to be on the final roster. I did that exercise a couple weeks ago, the infinite number of line combinations, and the more I tried, the more difficult it was to get Pustin in. And don't forget about Jesse Puljujärvi as well. He's another guy who could firmly ensconce himself on the third line, even the fourth line, or he could be waived and claimed by somebody. There's a lot of questions, but there aren't spaces unless you're considering Puljujärvi and Beauvillier, who's 27 now, as young guys. No, the youth movement will begin 25-26. Big turnover. They're probably going to clear space next summer for Owen Pickering after he has a full year in Wilkes-Barre. At least that would be the hope now that he matures on a certain pace that allows them to pencil him in to the NHL lineup for 25-26. At that point, you do absolutely clear space for Vasily Ponomarev and perhaps Tristan Brose, perhaps Tanner Howe. And the team will have a much younger complexion in October of 2025. Let's see here. Steve says better to keep Poulin as the extra forward and let Ponomarev play top minutes in Wilkes-Barre until he seizes a spot. Well, you're right on the second half. I don't think they would stash Ponomarev in the press box unless they have a plan to use him, a certain number of games. All the forwards I just mentioned, though, that are going to go through waivers, Puustinen and Puljujärvi, I think those guys actually rank ahead of Sam Poulin. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Thanks for reminding me, Colton. Cody Glass. There's your extra forward. Doing this off the cuff, there are so many forwards that I should have a list just in front of me where I can just read them off, quite frankly. Cody Glass is a guy who will be on the NHL roster in all likelihood. But he's going to have to earn it. He won't get a free ride. Yeah, so I suppose he would be the 13th forward, or maybe he slots ahead of Beauvillier. But if he's competent in training camp, Rutger McGroarty is going to be in the lineup. You don't send him down in a numbers game. You get him in the lineup now because you want that growth and that maturation to occur. You don't want to punt 6 months of it just because you want to keep Cody Glass or keep Anthony Beauvillier from getting claimed on waivers. So, the last 3 or 4 minutes I've probably named, it's 19 forwards for essentially 13 spots. They might keep 14, although Mike Sullivan's typical modus operandi was to keep 8 defensemen, 13 forwards. But what do I think happens with Cody Glass this year? I haven't met Cody yet. I haven't seen him play in person a great deal. The first thing that happened after the trade was I picked up the phone and I called my Vegas people. By my people, I mean the friends I made out there last year who, we talk hockey and they give me the unvarnished scoop. And the scouting report was not glowing on Cody Glass. He's not a fast guy. He's not a tough guy. He's not, he's not physical, hard to play against. He's kind of in the middle of, he's a soft scoring guy who doesn't score a lot all the time. So I don't know what to make of Cody Glass. Full stop. Okay, Michael has a 2-part question. I feel like I'm at a White House press conference now. Mr. Kingerski, 2-part question, if I may. Will you be open? Will I be at opening night? Unless the Penguins, usher me out by my belt loops, yes, I will. Also, with the update on Crosby considering playing into his fourth, people who wrote that. Now, there was a source story, and then like 3 blogs picked it up. Crosby didn't really say he was going to play into his 40s. He's more open to it. The full context is every season takes a different toll on his body. He's taking it year by year now, seeing how he feels. How do I feel? How do I feel? How do I feel? So is he considering playing into his 40s? He will when he gets to 40. That was really the story, and that's why I didn't write it, because, well, yeah, he's going to. I think we all know that Sidney Crosby is going to play hockey for as long as Sidney Crosby can play hockey. Will he play into his 40s? Yeah, I think so. But anyway, your question, do I think he could play until 45? That's going to really depend on what's in his heart. I will mesh my personal experience and Jaromir Jagr's recent discussions on the matter. Now that I'm past 45. Jagr, what did he tweet? Was it last, February or so? He's in the gym at 11 o'clock, and he's like, why am I in the gym at 11? My entire life, I've been doing this. Family and friends took a back seat. And you ask yourself why you're doing it, and then the only answer you come up with is because this is what I do. This is how I do it. And this is all that I do. Jagr's words really just rang a bell with me last year, because I feel the same way about Pittsburgh hockey now. The number of friends I've had drift away because I am just immersed in this, in my company, in hockey coverage and all of that. The number of friends who have kind of drifted away is not insignificant. And I understood, and I understand. And Crosby will get to a point when he will genuinely have to choose if he wants a life. Do you want your life now? Do you want to keep playing hockey and punt getting a life until then? I don't know. It's, I think everyone assumes, hockey is only the thing Sidney Crosby has, but at some point you wake up and you're like, you know what? I wouldn't mind having more of a life. I wouldn't mind going on vacation in January to the islands. I wouldn't mind spending time with these people or those people. Could he play? Yeah, sure. Physically, I think he could. Is it mentally? Will he want to do that? 45. That's also, don't forget, great players have the most difficulty with the decline. When will that decline happen with Crosby? You never know. Obviously, he's not as fast as he was. He's a little bit of a different player than he was 5 years ago, 6 years ago even. How will he accept that decline? Mario hated it. Drove Mario up a wall and back down. Lemieux walked away at, 31 years old, because the game was kind of crappy, the clutching and grabbing, but also because he began to feel that a little bit of that decline. And he was like, nope, I'm out. See ya. Okay, thoughts on a La La Land top 9? Oh, I see. You're going full-on fantasy trades here. Nick Robertson, Sidney Crosby, Brian Russ, Michael Bunting, Evgeny Malkin, Puustinen, O'Connor, Hayes. Puustinen on the second line? No. Puustinen will have to greatly improve his consistency, greatly improve his hard to play against. He's not a good enough scorer to play some of the hockey he was playing last year. Phil Kessel could get away with it when he was scoring 35 goals. When you're scoring 10 or 15 goals, you can't get away with it. Even 20 goals, you can't get away with, the spotty play. So, no, I wouldn't put Puustinen in there, but O'Connor, Hayes, McGroarty. Listen, if it shakes out where somebody could take the spot with Crosby on the top line, O'Connor, Hayes, McGroarty would be a pretty fantastic third line. That's for sure. Let's get to Ryan. I don't think McGroarty should play top line minutes. He looks like a sloppy upper body skater. He is working on it. Let's see. Seems stagnant with the puck in tight situations. Put him with Hayes. He's not ready for Crosby. Well, the last few words are probably very true. Not ready for Crosby. That you don't toss a rookie there. The one obvious exception was the natural, Jake Gensel, who just thought the game on a high level from day one. Gensel could handle that. Yeah, you'd be asking a lot of Rutger McGroarty there. Okay, Sonny, can I contrast the relationship between Sullivan and Hextall versus Sullivan and Dubas? Yes, I can. Being in proximity to all three, I would like to know your take. Wait, are you in proximity? Don't be stooging me. Don't be doing that to me. Don't be like, running snitch on what I say. No, I can't say I was close to any of them. Okay? A generation ago, the hockey writers, and Dave tells me the stories. Dave Molinari turned to me last season at one point. And because access now is so different than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, certainly different than it was 30 years ago. Dramatically different when Dave started in 1983, I think was Dave's first year on the beat. Anyway, Dave turned to me and said, if this was all the access we had back then, I'm not sure it would have lasted. I'm not sure I would have wanted to last. Because, there is the Great Wall of China now between media and team. Think of how few times Kyle Dubas has talked since he was hired in June of 2023. 5 or 6 press conferences? Yeah, probably 6, maybe 7. 2 drafts, 2 trade deadlines, that's 4. Hired 5. Preseason, 6, 8. Okay, maybe 8 or 9. It used to be, you'd be at the arena, you'd bump into a guy, you could say, hey, what's going on with this, what's going on with that, and you'd get some information. Now, you don't do that. And you could, wander over to a player and have a conversation. Or actually, you could even have a conversation with a player away from the arena not too long ago. But that stuff doesn't happen anymore. So anyway, now that I've bored you with that part of the story, the relationship between Sullivan and Hextall, I'm going to give you some secondhand information because neither guy specifically told me they didn't like the other. But I wrote about this. There were visible moments of distance, frustration on the part of Mike Sullivan with Hextall. I forget who it was when we said, okay, so this player will probably go on waivers this afternoon then. And Sullivan's like, you'll have to ask Ron. Now, to that point, Sullivan was always on top of what was going to happen. With Jim Rutherford, Sullivan never punted a question like that. But that happened multiple instances with, in the Hextall regime when Sullivan didn't have an answer. You'll have to ask Ron. So, take what you will. Dubas and Sullivan seem to have a good relationship. I'm sure they're going to disagree frequently in the coming couple of years if Sullivan lasts through it, because Sullivan's going to want to win and Dubas is going to say no. Sullivan's going to want a player to be added or, want something to make it easier to win in the immediate, and Dubas is going to say no, that hurts my plan for winning in the long run. And Sullivan's going to have to kind of swallow that. That's the nature of a relationship in a GM, coach, in a rebuilding sort of situation. That will not be unique to Sullivan and Dubas. I think they have a good relationship now. I certainly haven't heard anything to the contrary after a year plus. Did I take like 10 minutes to answer that question? I'm sorry. I think the sound has, in fact, held up. I haven't heard any pops in here. If it was the wall outlet, I'm going to laugh maniacally. After all the money I spent and things I changed, it would be a bad wall outlet or power bar. Who is anchoring the PK? Steve asks. Rust, Eller, Achari, O'Connor. But what happens if Eller and Achari are traded? Beauvillier has begun to kill penalties. Hayes, actually, referenced becoming a penalty killer. I don't know if Hayes would be really good at it because Hayes doesn't have that great burst in skating, but he has got a pretty good wingspan. So, don't forget Blake Lizotte. Lizotte will be on the PK. That's one of his great features. So there's that. Brandon, what's the news on Tanner Howe injured and being at Prospects Challenge? Tanner Howe will not be at the Prospects Challenge. He suffered a facial injury. That's all we know. I didn't really have enough to write a story on it, and I apologize I didn't before we hopped on, Brandon. I think it's a minor facial injury, but yeah, he's not going to be at the Prospects Challenge, which is greatly disappointing. I really, really wanted to see Tanner Howe. He would have been one of the three guys I would have keyed in on for this up in Buffalo, but you know as much as we do at this point. Okay. JR, who makes the biggest decline on the team this season? I hate to say this. I hate to answer a negative question like this. I think you're going to see Evgeny Malkin now begin that step down. Or let me rephrase that. If it happens, I wouldn't be surprised. How's that? Nitrate. Agreed on the analysis of Puustinen. A quick side story. When Puustinen arrived in Wilkes-Barre Scranton, the PR for Wilkes-Barre had a talk with the team, kind of just went around individually and said, hey, when you talk about him coming, make sure you really pronounce the T. I'm not making that up. Anyway, everyone says, though, his shot is incredible, but he has an odd reluctance to use it, as well as apparently he is an analytical darling. Analytics and analytic darlings to me, every year that I cover hockey as in-depth as I am right now, every year that I do this, I fall further and further away from the analytics. Why? Because the Penguins had very good analytics last season. The Penguins got just knocked out of the building 7-0 against Toronto on December 16th. The game that I thought was the harbinger that should have been absolute mash the panic button time, and the publicly available analytics showed an even game. That was just all of last season. The analytics were garbage for the Penguins. And I know, I hate to say that in a public space because the analytics folks gang up and man, they just come at you in waves and just indignant, smarmy, and snarky. Oh, well, I guess numbers. I guess you don't like to count. Numbers show you the real picture, not the subjective picture. And I'm like, no, I've covered enough hockey. I know the real picture. Was my impersonation okay? of the nondescript, stuff I get tweeted at. Puustinen didn't use his wrist shot enough, in part because he wasn't skating hard enough last year. He wasn't getting himself open enough in the NHL. He wasn't getting enough space in good ice to let it rip. It is a little bit slower. His wrist shot's a little bit slower than other guys who have that snap release and the puck is spinning and on its way. Those are genuine, pure goal scorers. Puustinen actually slides his bottom hand towards the top. So it becomes almost like a golf club as he's letting it whip. Not rip, but whip. And it can take, a little bit extra, longer. And, so he's got to, play harder, more consistently away from the puck, get himself in good spots to get those good looks. You don't toss a rookie there, Rust and Sheary. Well, Brandon, I'm going to explain something. Sheary was 24, and the Penguins didn't have a lot of options. He had a good season beside Crosby, yeah. Brian Rust was a fourth liner for 3 years. So you don't toss a rookie there, especially a 20-year-old rookie, unless he's Jake Gensel. And Sheary had something going for him, too. Sheary can think the game. Sheary was quick and nimble, and until his confidence was crushed at some point, 2 years in. He had that good year, gets a 3-year, $9 million contract, and then just completely sort of imploded and struggled. And you don't have to go do anything to yourself. I mean, hey, if that's what your afternoon calls for, have at it, light some candles and go for it. But I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying you don't put a rookie there, except in extreme circumstances. Let's see here. Howe, Bros, and McGroarty. Oh, up in the prospects tournament. Yeah. I think you're going to like Tristan Bros. I really liked scouting him. I liked him when scouting him in Wilkes-Barre. I thought he hit the ground running in those 2 playoff games. The line they were on, he was on the line with Koivunen. Terrible mix. Koivunen kept trying to slow the game down and hold the puck and try to, let the play evolve and figure out what was going to happen. And in the process, the puck was taken from him. Whereas Bros was playing a very quick north-south game, and he and Koivunen just had zero, next to, absolute zero chemistry. But Bros and McGroarty might be a slick little combo up in Buffalo. Michael says, I may think Malkin is declining, but it could be Letang over him. For the Penguins' sake, you would hope not, because after this, Letang has 4 years left, including this one. So next summer, he's going to have 3 more years on his contract. If his decline begins now, let's see here. Ken, there is no question if any roster player holds value for a decent draft pick or a prospect, they're as good as gone. Again, it depends on where the Penguins are in the standings, right? If the Penguins are contending for a playoff spot, a lot of these guys will be safe. You will absolutely not trade Brian Rust if the Penguins are in 3rd place. That would be a betrayal of Sidney Crosby. Full stop. So, but if the Penguins are 6 or 8 points out, then you can say to Sid, listen, this isn't working. We need to accelerate this. And that's, I guess, where the fork in the road is. Oh, Nitrate says, the Penguins are proof analytics don't mean everything. Yeah, Penguins did have a ton of scoring. Penguins had a ton of scoring chances on the power play, according to the stat sheets. Now tell me, for all of those of you who watched a lot of the 82 games last season, can you truly tell me The Penguins' power play had a higher than average number of high danger scoring chances. If anybody can say that with a straight face, you need to be in politics. Brandon says he can see Bros getting into the lineup if you have an injury spell this season. It depends on who survives waivers, but yes, I certainly. And here's why, by the way. Not just agreeing with you, but let me explain why to everybody else who most likely hasn't seen Tristan Bros play. His skating from last summer to to May was so dramatically improved. I don't know what happened. I don't know what he figured out. Whether it's confidence, whether he got a new pair of skates and blades, I don't know, but he was a full step quicker, maybe more than a step quicker in Wilkes-Barre's playoffs than he was last year in the rookie prospects and that sort of stuff. I guess he didn't play in the Prospects Challenge last year. He would have been at the Prospects Camp. And I remember noting this looks like a Hextall miss, drafting him in the second round. And now I would absolutely not say that. Do I see the Penguins re-signing Malkin to a one-year deal if he chooses not to retire? Well, he's got 2 more years. Ask me in 2026 about that. Okay, so I have done a full hour. At this point, I'm going to call last call. I haven't even shared the screen or anything for like 40 minutes. I apologize. You've been looking at my face? What's wrong with you? You all must be a masochist to be having to stare at my face for an hour. Although I got a full 2 bites of my sandwich before the show started. Hopefully it's not too soggy. I buy cheap roast beef. I walk over to Dollar General. It's the only, sort of grocery store within a mile of me that, I don't feel unsafe in. And I just buy, I go back and I buy some of the, Hillshire Farms roast beef or something, Borden Swiss cheese. Yeah, I don't break the bank. But I do every now and then go to Aldi and buy, they've got this stone brown mustard and slather it all up, and it makes the cheap ingredients taste pretty good. So here is the there's a lot more. Let me get, man. I'm going to start at the bottom here. I'm skipping a lot of your questions. You want to see my sandwich? I just showed it to you. Can we see Jari back to 2020 form this year with the new defensive pairings? It was in 2021 that he had the .919 save percentage. 2 years ago. 21-22 was the year Jari had the .919. Don't forget, he's been an All-Star twice. Or played in the All-Star game. There is a difference between the end of the season being named an All-Star and making it to the All-Star game because of the divisions. And you get what I'm saying. Yes. I actually think the crowded crease is going to push Tristan Jari to a much higher level. I do. I think he's going to have a little chip on his shoulder like he did at the start of last season. People forget how good Tristan Jari was from October to late January, mid-February. I think I've said in the past until late February. I went back and looked, and it actually was more like late January, early February when Jari began to, regress a little bit, and Nedeljkovic began to get a few more games. But there's no reason to think Tristan Jari is not a competent NHL goalie. He might not be your .920 guy in March, but he could be. He's got that talent. So let's see here. Okay. Nope, those were all of the questions. So at 1 minute and 5, and no reported sound issues? Well, that's amazing. Okay, kids, I'm done. I'm going to eat a sandwich. I'm going to get back on the keyboard. I have some Vegas Hockey Now stuff to do, some articles to write. We're getting that site refired, and we're hiring a couple of people. Hopefully, someday I'll tell you the stories. We have had I'll tell you the story from last May, because there's no way he would ever hear it. I won't use his name, in part because I forget his name. He moved away from Vegas and was working at a newspaper in a different state on the East Coast. He saw that we were hiring. He contacted me and said, Dan, I am desperate to get back to Vegas. You say the word, and I'm there. Oh, okay. Looked at his resume. Substantial journalist resume. Small paper stuff. He didn't work for the New York Times or Washington Post, but, he knew how to go cover sports. He knew how to write a story. We're like, okay, we can teach you the rest, because there's a bit more to the National Hockey Now formula than just writing a game story. Drives me nuts when people just want to write a game. Like, you don't read game stories. None of you read game stories. You all want to note the analysis and the locker room stuff. Anyway, he gets out to Vegas. We train him up for a week. I'm out in Vegas to, in fact, train him. I'm living at the Oyo Hotel, knowing I was going to be there for probably 2 weeks. The Oyo Hotel is the old Hooters. It's $30 a night for good reason. I loved my room. They gave me a suite up high, but, I would step over the drunk at the bottom of the elevator every morning. So I'm training him. His first game, warning bells start going off in my head. He starts asking some pretty perfunctory questions. I'm like, uh-oh. So I crank out a post-game story as fast as possible. I have it ready at the horn because I don't think he's going to be anywhere close to ready. Final horn sounds when he's supposed to file his post-game story and get on to the second tier of stories. And he's like, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? These are things I had explained. These are things he should have known. So I published my post-game story. I'm like, move on to the second tier. Get on to the analysis. The response came back, what do you mean? If anybody in my life asks, what do you mean? It is almost a shorted, angry answer from me. I didn't stutter. I didn't garble my words. It was a text. Get to the next level. Get to the analysis. So I cranked out analysis really quick, and I got that up, about an hour, 15 minutes later. He quit. He quit that night. He's like, Dan, I don't think you suffer fools very well, and this job just isn't going to be for me. So literally, this guy packed up his car, moved out to Vegas, and quit a job 3 days later. You can't make that stuff up. We also had a writer we had to terminate before he started because he slapped someone at work. He had a part-time job to pay the bills. He slapped somebody. And then he kind of called us and said, well, yeah, there might be a problem you should know about. I may have slapped somebody. And these are two stories that I can tell you. The other couple, I don't know what it is out in Vegas, but so we're looking for Vegas writers. And that town has bedeviled me. It is my Eleanor. I'm done now. That was a 5-minute story time. This is what I deal with on a daily basis. All right, kids. I will talk soon. Have fun.